Oh, welcome back to Gronsky Books. What is all this mess? It has been a while since I've recorded a video. Give me a minute to clean this up. In today's video, we're going to be talking about Don't Let the Monsters Out, an American airman's descent into darkness at Camp Bucca, Iraq. And this is written by former Staff Sergeant Heather O'Brien. All right, I think we're all set up now. This is looking a little bit better. It's looking a little bit more like Gronsky Books. I was fortunate enough to have the privilege of speaking to the author earlier this week. Heather O'Brien was gracious enough to spend a few hours with me at a coffee shop. It wasn't a formal interview or anything, but after reading this book, I had to reach out to her. There are so many similarities between her experience and mine. Not the technical aspects of our individual deployments. Those details are completely different. In fact, her experience is so singularly unique, at least among the books that I've read and the other veterans that I've met and talked about our deployments with. I've really never heard a story told like this before. However, the psychological impact is overwhelmingly familiar. A quick rundown of this book. Camp Bucca in Iraq was a detainee facility, originally equipped to handle up to 5,000 detainees. And by the end of Sergeant O'Brien's deployment, Camp Bucca was housing in excess of 20,000 detainees. Detainees who were very violent, frequently rioted, and did not allow themselves to be kept in any kind of hygienic way. This caused a lot of problems. I just find this remarkably difficult to actually say anything about this book. So if you'll forgive me for rambling a little bit, this one is a little bit hard for me to find my way into. And like I said, I didn't write a script for this. I didn't take really any notes while I was reading the book. My reason for wanting to talk about it today is twofold. One, to kind of highlight the importance of veterans telling their stories, and two, my own struggles with writing about my story. So let's talk about Heather O'Brien. She's from a kind of a small town in the Midwest, raised in the church. Had previously to this book, the story in this book, deployed to Afghanistan. She was a member of the Air Force Security Forces, which is a cop. But even though she came from a family of veterans and had previously deployed to Afghanistan, nothing could have possibly prepared her. No pre-deployment training, no amount of warning, no amount of like weapon safety and, vehicle rollover drills or anything like that could have possibly prepared her for what she was going to encounter at Camp Bucca. She flew in one night, on the first day that she arrived, and the detainees were already rioting. That was her welcome, flying in on a helicopter, getting an aerial view of the camp on fire and the detainees rioting. And it never slowed down from there. And what that does to a person. This book is pretty short. It's 190 pages, and I would say that it's the probably middle 2/3 of this book that really tell the whole story. So I would say that it's about 120 or 130 pages of just non-stop aggression, countering riots, dealing with the squalid conditions. The smell of the camp is something that she couldn't get washed out of her clothes even after she finally left. Singularly disgusting book. It is disturbing, and it should be. And through all these like harsh conditions, the overcrowding, the lack of any kind of cleanliness or hygiene, the frequent violence of the detainees against American troops, and detainee on detainee violence, in some cases extreme violence against each other, so much so that different tribal affiliations had to be sequestered into different groups within the camp. Because of these conditions, it is believed that ISIS arose out of Camp Bucca. I mean, Heather O'Brien did not pull any punches in this book. I've read a number of memoir-style books from Iraq. I've read some more journalistic attempts from, the combat camera reporters that came in. This book is a little different than all those in that she when I talked to her last week or earlier this week, she does not describe herself as a writer. She says she's a typist. She sits down with a keyboard and just types a story. She tells the story differently than other writers might, especially journalists. This is a very, very editorialized account of her time. But her self-scrutiny is completely unflinching. And that word can be overhyped sometimes, unflinching or self-disparaging or whatever. We've heard those terms before, but Heather O'Brien does not paint herself in a very pretty light here. No matter how appalling these stories got, I never found myself feeling very critical of her. The title of this book is "Don't Let the Monsters Out," and this phrase "Don't let the monsters out" is lifted from a chief master sergeant who was trying to apparently give like a pep talk to the newcomers when Sergeant O'Brien first arrived at Camp Bucca, but he was just the portrait of a defeated man. He was on his way out. I don't know how long he'd been there before, and this chief didn't say much in this newcomers briefing, but he did say, "Don't let the monster out. Don't let the monsters out," or monsters. And when I first read that, I took that to mean the detainees. You don't let the detainees out. Like, no matter what happens, you can't let them escape, right? These detainees are combatants in the war in Iraq. Some of them were captured after firing RPGs into, U.S. tanks and troops, firing on them. Some of them, however, were just people who were out past curfew and were arrested by U.S. troops, and their status is sort of unknown, but they're thrown in with everybody else. So you never really know who you're dealing with. Anyway, the true meaning of "Don't let the monsters out," at least as Sergeant O'Brien interpreted it, was that there's a monster inside of all of us, and no matter what your humble beginnings are, no matter how good of a person you think you are, you're put into a position where you are guarding upwards of 20,000 detainees, many of them violent and radicalized, and they are always trying to kill you. They are rioting on the regular. I don't want to say too much about the nature of those riots. It's graphic. It is extreme. It is one of the most graphic. It's just truly appalling, some of the details in this. And so what does that do to even the best of us? It breaks us. Of course it does. And there is a monster that lives inside of all of us. And by and large, I think we all do a commendable job of keeping that monster in check. But when you are worn down and worn down and worn down, and you're not being supported by the people who have put you in that position, the U.S. government in this case, whose fault is it? Where do you direct your anger? In the moment, Sergeant O'Brien directed her anger at the detainees. It's the most obvious source of the problem. They're the ones who are actively trying to kill her. I'm just really struggling to come up with words to describe how I feel about this book, what my response was. And I guess that confusion is part of the review here. That kind of uncertainty and unbalanced feeling that it's left me with is part of the review. This is a remarkable book, especially for someone who doesn't think she's a writer. It's a commendable book, and it's a story that for certain the U.S. government would not probably want to be told. But it's a story that I believe, and it's a story that Heather O'Brien certainly believes needs to be told. And I, going further, I think that every single veteran who has the what should I say, the inclination to tell their story should. You don't have to tell your story. Sometimes people don't want to talk about it. Some people only want to talk about it with their friends. Some people don't want that to be public. Totally understandable. But anybody who has the inclination to tell their story, I think should. I think you should go with that impulse, and you should tell that story. So when I met with Heather, I asked her a number of questions. Let's see. These are the notes that I took are actually the questions I wanted to ask her after reading the book. Actually, so I'm going to keep that part of the conversation just between us. But I did ask her, like, what process did she go through when deciding how to tell this story? But anyway, I asked her about, what process she undertook to kind of formulate her ideas for how to present this story. The reason I ask her that is because since 2017, I've been trying to write my own story about my deployments. So in 2017, I had just been retired from the Air Force for 3 years, and I was feeling fairly restless. I left my son with his mother for a few months, and I visited my uncle in Minnesota. He has this farm way out in the middle of nowhere. It's a very, very remote location, and I wrote my book. But I had an incredible amount of trouble talking about the deployment itself. I wrote hundreds of pages kind of around the story of the deployments. That was fine. I didn't really have a problem writing that. It was when I got to the theater itself that the story just completely evaporated from me. And part of the reason for that is that my deployments were very much shrouded in secrecy. They were a lot of the things that we were doing we were told were classified, and would be classified for 70 years. So for the last 22 years since my last deployment, I have not been able to share with anybody the nature of my deployment, what I was doing there, and that's been a hardship. Really difficult to know, like to kind of create a fictional narrative around actual operations that were close enough to what I was experiencing to be able to communicate that internal struggle externally through the narrative, the fictional narrative of the deployment, without actually giving away any of the military secrets. So it was really tough. So one of the things that I really wanted to know was, her Heather's process in telling this story. She told me was that the writing of this was kind of a therapeutic tool. Sometimes just talking about these hyper traumatic moments in our lives can strip them of their power a little bit. Honestly, a lot of the times that I'm feeling the most overwhelmed by my experiences is in the quiet moments of my life, or laying down in bed with my eyes closed in the dark, and suddenly I can't see anything but the terror in front of me, crawling out of my memories. And that can be horrifying. So she suggested that regardless of what I eventually wanted people to know, and what I was willing to share with the public, that I write the whole story down somewhere that's just private to myself, something that I could maybe even destroy later if I had to. But in that way, in the writing of it, I can find my in. How do I enter this narrative? Like, what pieces of my story are going to be sort of tangible and relatable enough to others on the outside, that I can use those bits, like teleport my reader into my experience. So that's what I did. And actually, in that time, I have been kind of researching my deployment, basically, the various units I was associated with. I was completely blown away by the fact that almost everything has been declassified in the last 10 years. I had no idea. It's not like they're going to send me a letter. The U.S. Air Force isn't going to write me and say, "Hey, Eric, by the way." I found an incredible amount of stuff that I was associated with. Things that I never thought were going to come to light in my lifetime. That kind of led me down some crazy roads of endless research, and hours and hours of reading and a lot of sleepless nights. I have a really strong idea of how I'm going to tell this story now. And I really appreciate it. Heather, if you're watching this, thank you very much for meeting with me. Thanks for your advice. I'm just really grateful for that conversation that we had. It's been remarkable. So that's me. I wonder if I can find a section in here that I could read. Okay, I found one here. This is from page 65, chapter 9, Enemies All Around. I'll give the detainees some credit. They were pretty inventive when it came to making weapons. Of course, they made the traditional toothbrush shanks, but they could make a weapon out of almost anything. They created David and Goliath slingshots. They would use the stretchy part from the waistband of their pants along with additional clothing pieces. They could fire a rock at us with deadly accuracy. One of them hit a tower guard who was wearing eye gear and a helmet right above the glasses and right below the helmet. It was a perfect shot. He suffered a crushed nasal passage and cracked skull and was in a coma for several days. They didn't have a lot of rocks in the compounds. They made them. They took the serving of chai, hot tea we had given them with their meals, and poured it over bowls and buckets of sand. As it cooled, they formed into a mixture into rocks and let them harden. I took 2 of these rocks home from Iraq. In the 6 years I had them, they never cracked or crumbled. Not a single piece of them broke off. There's one last thing that I want to say before I go. And that's, Heather, you declined to call yourself a writer, but I think you should stop doing that. You are a writer. You are a natural storyteller. I wish you all the best with your future projects. Your openness and your honesty is inspirational, has been inspirational to me, and I know it will be to others. So thank you for your book. Thank you for meeting with me. Thank you for telling your story. And I know that was a bunch of rambling mess. It was probably not very concise or cohesive, but I really wanted to talk about this book. I've got a lot of other books to talk about that I will be recording those videos in the coming days. I'm in a place now where I've got some more time. I've actually, all those books that were all stacked up here, like I got a lot to say about all those books. I've read them all, most of them. So those are all coming in the coming weeks on this channel. So keep a lookout for those. And, until next time, read something good.